Thank you for downloading The Luminous Mind, episode 40.
In the area of education, it is the parent who has the right to determine how a child will be educated and not the state. Anytime a government restricts your ability to homeschool or restricts your ability to educate your own child, they're behaving in a way that's counterproductive for the family.
Benjamin Franklin once said, "Do not curse the darkness, rather light a candle instead." If you're ready to set your mind on fire, then prepare yourself for the Luminous Mind with your host, Rebecca Bowman.
Today's fire starter is Stephen Horwich. Stephen was a professional educator for over 40 years. He taught in the Master's Writing Program, USC, and LANSD in private schools for 10 years and then gave up on the traditional education and homeschooled his two children. Now he's a homeschool advocate, and he's the author of Connect the Thoughts, a comprehensive homeschooling curriculum for ages 5 through high school. Also an Emmy Award-winning author of musicals, plays, and screenwrites with many credits. Welcome, Stephen.
No, I taught at USC, University of Southern California, in the professional writers program, and for LAUSD, the Los Angeles Unified School District.
Okay. I should have actually written those out. So that would made a lot more sense. But But welcome to the Luminous Mind. I told the audience a little bit about you. Do you want to go ahead and just kind of expound upon yourself? Tell us, a little bit about you and your family, and then also your profession.
Well, I've been both a professional writer, director, and a professional educator my entire adult life. I've done both pretty equally. I have two children, ages 27 and 23. And they had gone to private schools throughout their childhood where I had taught. I'd created arts programs at those schools and was teaching there. And when their mother passed away in 2001, I decided to homeschool them. They were 13 and 9 at the time. And so I started homeschooling them and immediately realized upon doing some research that there wasn't any really great workable curriculum for history and science and the arts and all of that. For homeschooling, it just didn't exist. I didn't feel that there was very much that was particularly good or workable even for schools. There's just not much out there at that time. So I started writing a curriculum and homeschooling my kids. I spent the next 11 years or so doing just that pretty much. Wrote over 300 courses in various subjects for different age groups. And, in the process of homeschooling my own kids, I really became a homeschool advocate because I think it's the only form of education that actually works today.
I was telling Stephen, I've been following him on Twitter for quite a long time, and I love his postings because there's a lot of meat to it. There's lots of facts and information and lots of things in there. It's not just fluffy stuff. And then also he's very direct with his posting, and I love that about his stuff. So I'm excited to have him on. So tell us about your personal educational experience. I'm just interested in how you have evolved and how your philosophy changed, how you came to that belief that homeschooling was the way to go.
Well, I'm a product of public education. I went to school in the San Fernando Valley most of my life, my youth, and graduated high school here. I never went to college, though I taught at 3 different colleges because I'm an Emmy Award-winning writer, have some success as a writer-director. I've been brought into different programs for different schools and universities to teach because they actually needed somebody who knew what they were doing and wasn't just an academic, because academics are generally not successful at whatever field it is they're teaching in. There's a reason they're teaching for a living and not also doing the thing that they're teaching professionally. It's because they're not very good at it. So I've been fortunate enough to be brought into various programs like the Professional Writers Program at SC in my early 20s to teach. And the more I taught at different levels, I taught for LAUSD and at the high school level, the more I saw the way the curriculum worked and the way teachers worked, the less enchanted I was with it. When I worked for LAUSD, I had many talks with the teachers at that particular school, and I discovered that many of them, not all, but many of them really disliked their students. They really didn't like them at all and really saw it merely as a job and a way to pay bills and get insurance for their families.
Wow.
They didn't really have teaching as a vocation or a calling. It was a way to pay the bills. And I think that teaching is sacred. I think that children are sacred and that we owe our children the very, very best we can, providing them some kind of a future and some kind of control over their lives and the environment. And education should provide that. That's the purpose of education. So when we don't accomplish that, as the public schools have miserably failed to accomplish and will continue to fail because of the way they choose to educate, when we fail our kids by the millions, we end up with a civilization with declining literacy, which we have, and declining functional literacy, which is the ability to pick up a piece of writing, read it, understand it, and put it to use. Functional literacy is in serious decline in this culture. We're in a lot of trouble, and it's because our educational system has failed us. So as I got older, I realized this was the case. The only reason I hadn't homeschooled my kids instead of putting them into private schools was that my wife was very concerned about the idea of socialization.
Oh, good topic.
which is a complete and utter lie, created by a psychologist named Cooley, Cooley, I believe, and he used his own kids as guinea pigs in his research. I'm sure they appreciated him for that. And the idea of socialization was that he was paid, Cooley, to come up with an idea for education that would service big business. Industries were looking for inexpensive, easily manipulated employees who would not complain, who would take orders. And socialization was born out of that need. It was paid for by big business and then instituted into education. It's a terrible idea. It's a ridiculous lie. Unfortunately, millions of people fall victim to it. So when she passed away, I looked at it all and I thought, well, it's up to me now, and I have to make decisions as to what's going to work best for my children, our children, and took everything she had said into account, but I felt that this was the correct route. And started to make myself into an expert on homeschooling, which took a while and a lot of experience because for those of you who homeschool, you know that it's a lot of work, it's hard to do, and it takes a while to start to master the ideas involved.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's one of the travesties of our society is that we've moved kids out of our lives. And then so when we try to bring them back in, we struggle for a while. We're not used to mixing. Yeah. I wasn't with my parents all day long, and it's really a struggle for me to have them around. I mean, they love being here because that's what they know, but it's sad. I mean, we've got to get used to figure out how to work together and how to integrate our schooling with our life and all of that. As a single dad, how do you support yourself, and how do you go ahead and homeschool them and also make a living for them?
Well, the way I did it, first of all, I was fortunate enough that most of my livelihood comes from writing, and I do writing at home. So I was already, when I made the decision to homeschool, already working at home. But when I started to homeschool, I also started to write curriculum, starting with history and science courses for my kids. And then I started showing the curriculum to some friends of mine who were teachers. They became excited about the curriculum. They pulled their kids out of the schools they were in and started coming to my house within a month of my beginning this process. So within a month, I had 10 children in my house every day. I had 2 other teachers in my house every day. They worked with the kids. I wrote curriculum. And then as we'd run into any kind of a problem or a sticky situation with the curriculum with the kids, I would sit down and work with the kids and rewrite the curriculum again and make it work for them. And in that way, we homeschooled pretty much for about 5-6 years.
Wow.
With every day with 9 or 10 kids in my house. But it worked out very well because I was happy to have them around. I was happy to have the help. And my kids had friends in the house all the time. And the great, terrible, ridiculous, ludicrous fear that your kids are going to be alone and will never learn to play in the sandbox with other kids if they homeschool is so silly. All a parent ever has to do is sit down with his kids and say, who do you want to study with? I'm a big fan of homeschool groups. I think the one parent, their children model, me and my 2 kids, for instance, that's the hardest way to homeschool. It's not the easiest way. It's the toughest way. The best and most productive way is to get 3-4 families involved, have all the parents involved in the process of running that homeschool so that parent number one can take on Monday afternoons and parent number two can take on Tuesday afternoons and parent number three. And they all will have their own expertise and be able to bring different subjects to the table that they can really help with. And that way no one parent is overwhelmed or has to quit his job, so that the argument that, single parents can't afford to homeschool goes out the window with homeschool groups. It doesn't apply because there are other people there who will pick up that slack and make it work. There are all kinds of ways to homeschool. There's not just one model. And I did a lot of experimenting with different models. And the best thing for us, and I think in general for almost anybody, is, if you can do it, is to create a group with 3 or 4 parents. You have to have great agreements with them. Everybody has to agree on what you're going to study and how you're going to study and what everybody's responsibilities will be. But once you get past that hurdle, it's an incredibly productive model, and your kids are always with you. It's an incredibly valuable experience for them and for you.
I think you just gave all of our single parent listeners an idea. So thank you for that. That sounds like you almost started a tiny little private school in a way, where you're all working together. So I kind of want to talk more about the socialization question. As you can see, this is why I love Steven's stuff, because that was pretty in your face thoughts of socialization. But, when we talk about socialization, that's like the number one question. Sometimes I really feel like it's a brainwashed question. Like, we've all thought that, like, oh, wouldn't it be great to do school at home, but then somehow that creeps in there. Oh, but they need to go to school because if they don't, they won't have that socialization. What is your research behind that? Sounds like you've actually studied it out a little more.
Yeah, I've actually written about it at length. It's easy to research. If you go on the internet and you look up Cooley, Cooley, I believe is how he spells his name, you'll find the entire history of the concept of socialization since he generated it. It actually is a very easy thing to research. You can date it. You'll discover exactly when it comes from. I've talked about it in several books I've written on education, and I think it's probably one of the 3 or 4 most destructive ideas in education. And we have been brainwashed into accepting it over the last 80 years, 70, 80 years. It's become a part of the cant that teachers and administrators pour out. And, they're very well funded. There's 3 million paid teachers in the public school systems in the United States. 3 million. So that's a lot of voices yelling, you need us, you need us, you need us, you have to have us, and you should pay us whatever we want, and teachers are underpaid, and it's all nonsense. Teachers as a group rank very low on the IQ list. They don't do well on those tests, which is fascinating in and of itself. And of course, they are one of the best paid groups in the United States. So they are not underpaid and overworked. They are overpaid and underworked. They work for 9 months. If you followed that strike in Chicago last year, that was a phenomenal thing where they had teachers in tears saying, we're doing this for the children. But if you looked at their over 60 demands, every single one of them was for teacher pay and teacher perks. Nothing was for the kids. Nothing. It was all a big lie.
And the teachers union president, if I'm right, I can't remember her name or anything, but she was screaming that they needed more pay. But doesn't she make at least over a 6-digit figure?
Yes. Of course, and many teachers do. The result of the Chicago teacher strike was that teachers within 3 years, even beginning teachers, would be paid $80,000 a year.
Wow.
$80,000.
Wow.
And that's for 9 months work. That's not for a year of work. So if a teacher picks up a summer school session, they make very close to $100,000. And that's the beginning salary in Chicago. Additionally, their pay package when they retire is worth approximately $2 million a teacher, which is why the Chicago school system is going bankrupt. It's why school systems all over the United States are going bankrupt. Additionally, for those of you who don't believe that teachers are all about the pay, there's the wonderful situation we had in Atlanta 2 years ago, where over 80 teachers were caught cheating, rewriting their kids' tests and putting in the correct answers because they had incentive-based teaching, where the higher the kids scored, the more pay the teachers got. So 80 of them had a party. with an administrator present, and they changed the kids' answers so they'd make more money.
Holy
If
cow.
you don't believe that that's what teachers are about, you got to open your eyes and start looking at what's actually happening. It was brought into court. It's still in court to this day. Unfortunately, most of those teachers who were fired have already been rehired or just moved into other schools. But that is happening all over the United States where there's, quote, incentive-based teaching. Teachers will cheat on behalf of the kids so they make more money.
Wow. Going back to parents, I mean, we look at how well educated a lot of our parents are. Many of our parents have much more education than some of the teachers that we're sending them off to, like you said. What's your feeling on that? I mean, what does a parent have to offer their children that maybe they couldn't get at a public school? Let's turn it back on them.
Oh, goodness. Well, that's a great question. Look, teachers, first of all, they have degrees not in history or science or in the subject that they're teaching. They almost invariably, short of the college level, they almost invariably have their degree in education. And that means they've been taught to issue tests, give homework, score tests, do report cards and grading, all that garbage that's incredibly destructive of education. And that's what they're experts in. A parent knows the child. A teacher needs a seating chart with everybody's name in it to know the name of your child. That teacher doesn't know anything about your child. If your kid closed his eyes and you asked the teacher what color your kid's eyes were, he couldn't answer. And 80-90% of the time, teachers use that seating chart to know the name of your kid. If you ask them the name and you took away the chart, they don't even know your child's name. The system doesn't know your kid, and the teacher doesn't know your kid, but you do. And you can listen to your kid, look at your kid, be aware of his indicators. And when a child is studying, whether you know the subject or not, because I don't believe that a homeschooling parent or teacher needs to be expert in much of any subject except the kid. That's the thing they need to be an expert on. If a kid is studying and his eyes light up on a certain subject and he says, wow, or expresses in some way some real interest, the parent can then redesign all of the educational effort around that subject, move it towards something that the kid is called to do, interested in, already reaching for, instead of force feeding that child subjects that they have no interest in at this time. It doesn't mean they won't have interest later. They may come around to those subjects, and that isn't a bad thing. But if you make education about, I want to learn this thing, and you let the child do that, then the child will want his education. He'll reach for it. He'll be excited about it. He'll look forward to the quote-unquote school time every day because he'll be learning about and doing things that he wants to do. And nothing in education is more powerful than the child's desire to learn. Nothing. Teachers can't provide it. Schools can't provide it. A parent is much more well-equipped to provide that and change the educational parameters around the kid's interests so that that actually occurs. Also, parents, we all have experience in life. We know all kinds of things. There's not a single person listening to this right now who doesn't know all kinds of things that they may not even know they know until they get into it and start working with a kid. Now, I'm a big fan, obviously, because I've spent 10 years writing one, of using a prepared curriculum. But I know a lot of homeschoolers who don't and who do what's called unschooling, where whatever comes up during the day, they use that as part of a lesson, and they educate their kids that way. The bottom line in homeschooling, folks, a lot of parents think, gee, am I qualified? There is in almost no state in the United States any rules or laws that stop you from homeschooling. That's number one. And anytime they try to pass those rules, and they're always supported by teacher unions, those are the guys who pay to try and get you to stop homeschooling because schools get paid by the head count. The more kids that go, the more money the school and the teachers make. So they don't want you homeschooling. There is no state in the union, as far as I know, where it's illegal to homeschool. That's number one. Number two, homeschoolers score higher on all the associated tests, on all the testing that's done. As a group, homeschoolers score higher than schooled children, either private or public school children. They do not score as high as homeschoolers. So whatever we're doing as homeschoolers, and there's about 6 million of us in the United States now, whatever we are doing, whether it's unschooling or working with a prepared curriculum or some kind of a mix, it's working. Universities like Princeton and Yale are looking for homeschoolers now. They prefer them because A, they're academically advanced over public and private schoolers, and B, curiously enough, they're better socialized. Now, why would that be? Mostly because kids in school are constantly looking over their shoulder, waiting to be bullied or attacked by a teacher or by another kid. It's so common in public schooling, it's become a horrible joke in education at this point. But your kid is at home. He's not being bullied unless you're bullying him, and, God help you if you are. He's being educated and loved. And kids like that learn to get along with others much more easily, much more fastly than kids who are constantly in fear and are looking for mechanisms to deal with others that accommodate that fear and come from that fear.
Well, and those children will reach out. They feel confident within themselves. They'll reach out and they will automatically befriend whoever's around them. Versus like the kid who's being bullied or struggles with that, they're not going to want to branch out and reach out to anybody else that they may not know because they don't know what that relationship's going to yield.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think people who are afraid tend to withdraw, and people who are self-confident tend to reach. And homeschoolers know they're loved, know they're supported, know they're in a safe environment, so they're much more inclined to reach. I think colleges and universities have figured that out now, and they are actively pursuing homeschoolers over public and privately educated kids.
Plus, they know how to take care of themselves. Or they're there with their parent, making the meals, doing their laundry. There's some of those basic skills that every one of us need to learn that you can't learn in a home ec class. Those kids are learning how to do that. They are so well educated and all of that the only issue that they can catch us on is that stupid socialization question, like you said. And what do you think it means to be socialized? What do you foresee? I mean, when people see homeschooled kids, sometimes they just automatically think, well, they're weird. What makes homeschooled kids so weird?
Well, first of all, I think they think they're weird because they've been told they're weird by teachers who have been pumping out that message now for 50 years. They don't want to lose those students because they get paid for those students.
Yeah. Well, and the crazy thing is I can be talking with somebody, my kids, they'll know us. They know us. And then as soon as they find out that we're homeschooled, all of a sudden the light switches. They think that we're awesome, we're amazing, and then all of a sudden, you're homeschooled.
Well, so give credit where credit's due. The teachers and their spokespeople have done an exceptionally good job of brainwashing the American public. However, that said, before 1860, everybody was homeschooled. All our founding fathers were homeschooled. Einstein was homeschooled. Thomas Jefferson was homeschooled. Almost any great figure you want to look at in history was homeschooled. So if we're weird, then they're weird. Yeah. I guess, Einstein was weird, and I guess Thomas Jefferson was weird, and George Washington and John Adams were both homeschooled, so I guess they're weird, and almost Charles Dickens was homeschooled. I guess he's weird too. So I think 6 of our presidents were homeschooled, by the way. So, you can buy into the lie, but you should know that you're buying into a lie. Homeschoolers are not weird, and I will give you an illustration of that. I used to take my kids to a local fast food place once a month. It was really close to a high school. I wanted them to see what the high schoolers look like. And we just sit in the back and eat and watch the high schoolers come in at lunchtime. And they'd be very, very violent, very profane, really, really not in good shape in terms of dealing with others, which is what socialization is supposed to be about, playing with other kids in the sandbox well, in an adult sense. You're supposed to be able to work with others, get along with others, get things done with others. Well, we never saw any of those kids able to do that, but we saw them really, really be good at being belligerent. So if you just look, folks, open your eyes, you will know it's a lie.
We had that experience just about a week ago at a restaurant where we were like, wow, these kids are out of control. And, my kids are just sitting there staring at them. I was kind of leading you with that question about being weird because I think people see them as weird because they're not the norm of what you expect teens to be. And so they do seem weird. So before we go on, let us take a minute and hear about our sponsors.
Hey, Firestarters, are you looking for a new way to listen to The Luminous Mind? Try listening on Stitcher. Haven't heard of Stitcher? Think of it as radio on demand. You can listen to The Luminous Mind anytime, anywhere. There is no downloading, no syncing, no wasted memory. Just stream your favorite podcasts such as The Luminous Mind. Stitcher is available on iOS, Android, Nook, iPad, and also from your favorite internet browser. Don't have Stitcher? Download it free today at Stitcher.com or in the App Store. And make sure you rate and review The Luminous Mind. so together we can continue to light minds on fire and change the paradigm of education.
Welcome back to The Luminous Mind with Steve Horwich and Connect the Thoughts. Well, let's move on to your curriculum. Let's talk about the inspiration behind it. We've kind of touched on it a little, that you created it kind of for your own children, but the inspiration that comes from behind your curriculum.
Well, I wanted to create a curriculum that was really built for the child to run his own education. That's number one. I wanted to take the teacher and even the homeschool educator as much out of the equation as possible, A, to free up the parents' time, and B, to make the kid more responsible for his own education. Because it is his education, and we want him to want it and to reach for it and to work for it. So I created a curriculum that doesn't involve any testing. There's no grading. There is testing, but only to find out what the kid didn't learn so we can send him back precisely to reread or restudy things that he didn't fully understand. When a child finishes a course in history or science in my curriculum, they've learned 100% of the material, which means if you're forced to give them a grade, you can only give them an A, because 100% of the material learned of necessity requires an A score. So the idea was to get rid of all of the tools that schools use to hurt kids and evaluate kids, homework, grading, all that stuff. I wanted to throw it out and come up with a system that really engaged the student, made him think for himself, made him relate the material to his own life that he was studying in history and science and the arts. What does it mean to him? How can he use it? We constantly ask them questions along those lines. All the lesson plans are fully designed so the homeschool teacher doesn't have any work to do in that regard. The kid opens up the lesson plan he's on, and he does it. It's laid out step by step. He follows the directions and does exactly whatever he's asked to do, defines words, reads material, uses maps, watches film, does things, exercises, and things with his hands to make the material his.
That's great. So what services do you offer? Is this an online type of a curriculum, or is it mostly, that you order and get different books, or, what's the services?
Yeah, they're all downloadable. All the courses are downloadable PDFs. You would buy a course and download it, and you could start immediately. Most of them are entirely self-contained, and they're for different age groups. There's pre-literate curriculum for ages 5 and 6, and for students who don't read at all. There's elementary for students who are learning how to read, and 7 and 8-year-olds as well. There's lower school for 9 and 10-year-olds, and there's upper school for 11-year-olds through high school. And then we have a master's program in writing for older kids also who are interested in writing for a living. Each level is designed for that age group and level of literacy, because we want the kids' literacy to expand. We constantly work in that direction. We constantly work to improve vocabulary and basic study skills.
That's great. So what successes have you seen when families use your products?
Well, I got hundreds of letters. I don't even know where to begin with that. We have hundreds of letters saying, you've totally changed our lives, and our kids are happy to be learning for the first time in their lives. I can't tell you how many times I hear that. We see kids who have given up on school be rehabilitated and jump in and really want to do it and determined to do it and grab onto it. And, I love the letters that say, I told my kid he could only work for 3 hours, and 5 hours later he was still working and refused to stop. We get that all the time.
That is awesome. That is great. So what benefits? We've talked about successes, but what benefits do you get from using your product? We talked about becoming a self-learner, some of those things, but do you have any other benefits you want to talk about?
Well, just pretty much what I said. The vocabulary increases with every lesson plan because we deal with vocabulary in every lesson for that subject. We deal with study skills, how to do research in almost every lesson plan has a certain amount of that. Almost all of the lesson plans have a hands-on component, so the student gets actual experiential, experience with the subject, especially in science and history and in the arts. I think that the idea of a curriculum is that it should be lived. It should become a part of the student's life. It should improve their ability to think, to reason. It It should improve critical thinking skills, which our curriculum is very carefully designed to do. It should improve literacy. It should work all the time. Every lesson plan should work in a number of ways to give you a more capable human being at the end of the day.
When I was looking on your website, it talks about how, you can use this. It's a secular, but you could also be a religious type. I mean, do you kind of want to go into basically what your curriculum is about?
Sure. Well, in history, we say that we're secular but religion friendly. What that means is first of all, I never attack anybody's religious beliefs or force any belief system on anybody, including science as a system. I don't enforce it. I provide information on every major religion, and it's very detailed, going back to their holy documents and their practices and their history. All of that is included in upper school and lower school history courses. So really starting around the age of 7, they're exposed to science as secular science, purely secular science, but they're also exposed to all the major religions in detail so that the fear of these things is removed. I don't think education should result in a lack of reach or in fear or in stupidity. And I think anytime you say, well, I don't want my kid to learn anything about this subject, it results in stupidity. That's a subject that kid doesn't know anything about. So I would rather present the ideas behind every subject: Christianity, Judaism, science, Buddhism, Hinduism. I want a child fully expose those things so he understands them, is not afraid of them, and when he encounters them in life, he knows what he's looking at and he understands what it means to him. And we never tell him what it means to him. We want the child to determine that for himself. So the curriculum is carefully designed to do that when we encounter religion and science. History is history, and we deliver history on the timeline as things happened in order. I don't jump around subject by subject, and I don't separate out subjects like now we're just going to study economic history or philosophical history. It's all life, and it was experienced in order by the race, and I want the student to have that experience when he studies history. So that's how we do that.
Well, and knowledge is power. I mean, you give a child who is well-rounded and well-read in a plethora of ways, you're going to put them in a situation where they can converse and communicate with anybody. I mean, that's...
Yes, and I think that absolutely right. I think that's a major goal of education, and I don't think public education hardly ever is able to result in that. But we can do that as homeschoolers, and I know my curriculum does result in that.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that I love about homeschooling is if we're learning a concept that maybe, I don't agree with or whatever, I've always kept open the theory of, well, with education, this is always somebody else's theory. Just like in science, especially in history, I mean, we don't exactly know, why the pyramids were built. I mean, stuff like that. I mean, you don't know exactly the reason behind a lot of the things. We're just guessing in a lot of ways. And so sometimes it is a theory, just like with science. And it's fun to learn somebody else's theories and thoughts on things and then to move on and hopefully you can form your own.
Yeah, I agree.
So it sounds fun.
America's greatest historian was Will Durant. He's really something. And one of the things he said about historians was that all historians are biased. They're biased in terms of their own upbringing and their own religious beliefs or their scientific beliefs or their whatever beliefs, and they're biased in terms of the culture in which they were raised.
Yeah.
So when they write their histories are biased. He said so. And he said it's a historian's job to try and overcome his own bias and offer as much in the way of facts, proven facts, as possible. That's also the job of somebody who's teaching in science. Just give me the facts. Don't give me your opinions. Don't tell me what you think happened. Show me the facts, and let's all evaluate those for ourselves and determine what they mean. So one of the things that's interesting is in our science course, one of our science courses, we cover the idea of the Big Bang. And I ask kids after they've studied the Big Bang, and we covered in detail, what they think of it as a theory, because it is a theory, it's not proven. And almost invariably, kids will reject it. They'll say, there was nothing there, then everything was there in a big explosion. And out of that big explosion, everything came. And they look at it and they go, really? So, and maybe later on they'll come to grips with that theory and have a different opinion. But we give them the right to accept or reject anything we provide as educators in the curriculum. And as homeschoolers, we should always be willing to overcome our own biases and let the student decide for himself what it means. They will change their minds as they get more experience and more education. They will change their views. But at any given point in their education, you have to be willing to put your hands up and say, that's what my kid thinks. Based on what he studied, maybe he'll study more later and he'll change his mind. But right now, that's what he thinks, and you have to accept that.
Yeah, exactly. That's great. I could go on and on about that.
Yeah.
But what are some of your long-term goals that you have for your curriculum company?
Well, let's talk about the long-term goals for homeschooling. I think that's more important.
Yeah.
If that's okay with you.
No, I'm totally up for that.
I'm happy if anybody wants to get my curriculum. It's Connect the Thoughts, and we're at www.connectthethoughts.com. Go take a look. There are a lot of free courses and services there, lots of them. Feel free to avail yourself. I think what's more important is, where is homeschooling going now? There are countries where homeschooling has been made illegal. The first country that made homeschooling illegal, and I'm sure this won't be a surprise to some of your listeners, was Nazi Germany.
Yeah. I have German listeners, though.
Oh, well, then they'll understand this. They'll know it's true, because to this day, homeschooling is still not legal in Germany. And if you homeschool your kids, as one unfortunate family found out, they can be removed from you, put in foster homes, and you will be put in jail. That's how big
stiff penalties, too. I mean, stiff fines.
Yeah. Yep, and the same thing is true in Sweden, who followed in Germany's footsteps a number of years ago. So, and Botswana, homeschooling is illegal. I think there are South American countries where it's very nearly illegal, such as Venezuela. So it isn't a right we can afford to take for, just assume that it's always going to be there. I live in California. And about 3 years ago, there was a move to make it illegal to homeschool unless the parent doing the teaching had a teaching degree. Now, at that time, there were about 170,000 homeschoolers in California alone. And that would have dropped the number to under 2,000. It would have been devastating.
Wow.
But an interesting thing happened, which I really appreciated. I am not a Republican, but I wrote our Republican governor, Arnold, the governor.
Yeah.
Arnold Schwarzenegger, who I really got to tell you, I really like. And I wrote him and I said, Arnold, I hate this new law that the Democratic Congress is trying to pass. What can I do to help you? And he wrote me back a letter and he said, don't worry, we're going to kill this thing dead. That's what he said. That's what he said.
That's
and
awesome.
It was great. And he got together with the top Democrat in the state, Jerry Brown, who is now our governor, right?
Uh-huh.
And they worked together to create a brief, brought it to court, and had the law thrown out as unconstitutional. So the top Republican and Democrat in California worked together to protect homeschooling. Bless their hearts.
Yeah.
We cannot take it for granted, but it is, I think, one of the most important rights we have as parents. Now, if you look at the United Nations Universal Declaration of Rights, which the United States agreed to in 1949, Article 26 says very clearly, in the area of education, it is the parent who has the right to determine how a child will be educated and not the state. That was signed by the United States. We officially signed on to that document in 1949. So anytime somebody threatens your right to homeschool, they're in violation of an international agreement that we signed off on in 1949.
Wow. And what is the theory? We can only guess. I mean, Nazi Germany, like you said, what is the theory? Why wouldn't a government want us to homeschool?
Oh, well, I mean, really, do we have to? The Germans wanted to make sure, the Nazis specifically, wanted to make sure that it was their ideology that was indoctrinated into kids. They had to get their children to the point where they would turn in their own parents to the government, and they did. And they did that by ending homeschooling and rigidly controlling education. Well, in the United States, Today we have Common Core. Common Core is the new set of restrictions and rules in education for public schools put out by the government 2 years ago, and it is disastrous, and it is unquestionably limiting in terms of what a child is going to be allowed to learn. So if you send your kids to public school, you have to be willing to accept the idea that your kids are only going to learn what the government wants them to learn, because it's government money and they determine what will be taught. And they have decided, if you'll take a look at Common Core, that what your kid is going to learn is going to be highly restricted and very, very flag-waving, patriotic, and, God help.
Nationalism, yeah.
Yeah, well, fascism of a kind,
Yeah.
Just like the Nazis were fascists and they outlawed homeschooling so they could control the message that kids got. Anytime a government restricts your ability to homeschool or restricts your ability to educate your own child, they're behaving in a way that's counterproductive for the family. They're no longer interested in the family or the well-being of the family. Now, I'm not political in any way anymore, because I don't think either party either has a clue as to how to educate a child. I don't think they have any idea how to educate children. But I also think they've worked together to really damage millions of kids through public education and the way it's done, and without ever really truly taking a look at what the results were going to be. So I think politics as a system is a ruinous failure in education. I don't see any reason to put our kids in their hands. I don't see any reason to assume that they know more about my child or how to educate him than I do. And I don't see any reason to assume that that they know more than you know about your kids, folks. So I would take a very serious hard look at that, because they're doing quite a bad job, and they have for a long time. Our test scores as a country have been dropping precipitously for 100 years. Here's an interesting statistic to kind of back that up. When they originally created the IQ test, the standard IQ test, it was designed so that the average score would be 100 and the genius score would be 150. And about 20 years ago, they found out that the average scoring, based on all the numbers that came in from the testing kids were doing, had dropped 10 points. So it was designed for an average score of 100, but the average score had become 90, and the average kid was not as smart as the average kid 50 years ago. Not only that, but to accommodate these lower scores, they decided that a genius no longer had to score 150 on the IQ test. 140 would be sufficient, because we're not as bright as we were 20, 30, 40 years ago. And that is the result of a failed, ruined public education system.
Yeah. But we all know if they only had more money, they could do better.
Yeah, they only had more money. Yeah, so just so you all know, folks, we're spending over $550 billion annually on public education. Take a look at the results. When they cry for more money, put that number in front of them, $550 billion plus, and ask them, really? Really? Right now, the average kid who goes to a public school, we're paying about $12,000 for that kid. And in some school districts, it's as high as $27,000, Chicago. So I got to say, folks.
Yeah, New York.
Yeah, they don't need more money. They need to close their doors. They are damaging kids by the millions, and it needs to end.
Yeah. Well, and I kind of just want to throw this out there for all those people that they're hell-bent on their First Amendment rights. They don't really think about how thought and the ability to educate yourself and your children in the way you want is part of that First Amendment right, and it really does need to be protected. So, boy, I could go on and on. You are hitting, I'm just like shaking because you're saying everything that's just awesome. Anyway, so what advice or encouragement would you give to someone who's just starting out?
Oh, well, I talk about that all the time, and I write books about it. If you're just starting, get my book, The Homeschooler's Handbook. It will walk you through everything you need to know, from legal to financing to how to educate your kid to how to get a curriculum together. It's a real resource for somebody who's just beginning. It's also a resource for people who have been homeschooling for a while and are looking for an edge. Here's what I would tell you if you're going to homeschool or you're just starting. Number one, do not be afraid. You cannot possibly do a worse job than the school districts did.
That's what my husband told me over and over. You can't be doing any worse.
You could not possibly do worse than the schools are doing for your kids. So Fear not, you can only improve upon the results they've been getting. It's almost impossible for you to do worse. I guess you could stick bamboo shoots under your kids' fingernails and hit them over the head with pots and send them to bed without supper every day and get worse results, but it would pretty much have to go there. So you will not do worse than the schools. You will do better. And I would suggest very strongly that, yes, get my book and find out a little bit about homeschooling and make sure you're within the law in terms of the way you're homeschooling so that the state doesn't stick their nose into your business. But take a look at your child real hard and ask your kid, what are you interested in? Because that's going to be the most important question to get an answer to. What kind of things really get you going? Are you interested in history? If you're interested in history, what part of history, what kind of history are you interested in? Are you interested in the sciences? Okay, great. What sciences turn you on? What is the thing you want to know about? Are you interested in writing or singing or dancing or riding a horse or building a car? What is it that interests that student? And then make that thing a very significant part of the curriculum. Make that thing a big part of each school day so that your student wants an education. Because here's the deal. They've been enforced in a school system to study specific subjects in specific ways at exactly the same pace as all the other kids in the room, exactly the same materials in exactly the same way. And we all know the kids are wildly different from each other and that you can't ask two kids to do the same thing in the same way and expect results. So as a homeschooler, you can take a breath, withdraw from that system entirely, look at your kid, give him what he needs and wants, what he's asking you for, what he's reaching for in terms of his education, and then he'll want the rest of it because he'll know his school day is going to include things that he selected instead of everything that was selected for him without any volition on his part.
Well, and it will vary over time. I mean, I've homeschooled long enough to see that, you have a child that starts out, he wants to learn about dinosaurs, or he wants to learn about, insects, or they all have. And then that's one thing parents are so worried about having these holes in their curriculum, but there won't be. I mean, children naturally move through, phases of things. So,
well, I think a parent who's really concerned about that should do a planned curriculum that covers all the subjects. That's fine. I'm a big fan of that. But you're absolutely right. Everything's going to get covered because education takes years. It's not a short game. It's a long game. Yeah. Also, there's other advice I would give you. If you're just starting, do not feel like you have to stick to a school schedule. Some kids work better starting at 11 in the morning or 1 in the afternoon or at 7 at night than they do at 8 in the morning. There are a lot of people who don't learn well in the morning. Design your school day around what really works best for you and for your children so that education is maximized, the time is maximized. Do not assign a ton of homework. Try not to assign any homework outside of reading because everything will be homework. Try and restrict school to about 4 to 5 hours for older kids so they have plenty of time to pursue their own interests and things that they discover they're interested in while they're doing their education.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The school schedule, it helps in so many ways. I mean, now my kids are teens and, they are they're more tired in the morning than they are, later in the day, I've noticed. So it really does work to their benefit to work the schedule around what's comfortable for the kids.
Yeah, you bet. Another thing I'd recommend that parents at least consider this is let the student help design his own workspace. You don't want a lot of stuff there that's distracting. I would not allow a video game within 100 yards of a kid while he's doing school. I took video games away from my kids entirely because I think they're very destructive. Basically the kid's going to be in that space for 4 or 5 hours studying. Let him have a say in what would make him comfortable, what would make the work go better. Let him, participate in the designing of the workspace. It can be simple. It can be very inexpensive, but then he'll feel like it's his space. He owns it, and when he steps in there, it's to do his work, and that's exactly how you want him to feel.
Yeah, exactly. Ownership in the education and in the space create a situation where they want to be there and want to do it. So
you bet. Mm-hmm.
Great. Okay, so if you could leave a legacy, what would it be?
Oh, I think that the way we do education is ineffective and even, in many cases, destructive. I think that children who do well in public and private school do so in spite of the way they're taught, not because of it. I think the self-starters will do well no matter how they're educated, and those are the people that the schools hang their hats on and say, we've done a good job, but they haven't done a good job. I would like to see things change in education in specific ways. I'd like to see grading come to an end in all of its forms. I'd like to see testing in order to evaluate a child come to an end. I'd like to see the drugging of children by schools come to an end. I'd like to see a lot of the system go away. Personally, I'd like public schools to close. I think they're a desperately, horribly failed experiment. And I think that private schools should toss out all of the methodology they've acquired from public education. Way too many private schools are just like public schools, except they're private and you pay to send your kid there. I've never understood why parents take advantage of that. I don't see what there is to take advantage of that. But if you have a private school and you're not grading kids and you're not testing in order to grade and kids are actually doing well and they're safe and they're happy, that's a good thing. So I would like education to change, and I would like the end result to be that we are raising generations of much more interested in the world children than the generation we're raising now, much more capable young adults than we're seeing coming up now as a rule, much more artistic, aesthetic, creative, better at critical thought and reasoning, much better at all of these things than the generations overall that we're raising. And of course, there are tremendous exceptions. There are wonderful, bright, intelligent, creative children being raised and educated right now. I would like every child to have that opportunity to be like that. And I think that the system needs to be desperately, wildly changed for that to happen.
Yeah. So before we say goodbye, do you have any final words, maybe a favorite quote or that you'd like to share? And then please go ahead and give us your contact information so our audience can get in touch with you.
Yeah, it's funny. I was reading a quote just the other day, a 2,000-year-old quote by a Chinese educator. And he described the schools of his time as failed because of the heavy testing and heavy homework and the heavy evaluation of students. And I just started to laugh. Nothing changes.
Yeah.
2,000 years ago in China, this wonderful educator was complaining about the very things I'm complaining about today. Somehow or other, I think we can do better, and I do think homeschooling is a big part of the answer. But form groups, protect yourself in that way and help your kid in that way. If you want to get a hold of me, you can always do it through my site, which is www.connectthethoughts. That's all one word, connectthethoughts.com. www.connectthethoughts.com. That's where you'll find my curriculum. That's where you'll find my book, The Homeschooler's Handbook. That's also where you can write me. I always answer any letters that are written to me, and I'm happy to do so. I'm happy to answer questions and talk to people who are looking at homeschooling and seeing if I can help them think through that.
Are you on any other social media besides Twitter? You anywhere else?
We have a Facebook group for Connect the Thoughts as well.
Oh, okay.
We're on Yahoo. We have a group there, and I answer questions in both Facebook and Yahoo, as well as on Twitter. So, yeah, we're kind of all over the place.
Well, I am definitely going to get on Facebook and find you there because, like I said, I love your Twitter stuff. And anytime you want to get something off your chest, I love your directness. You give me a call and we will put you on the air. So thank you so much.
Happy to do that. Yeah.
Thank you for listening to The Luminous Mind. To learn more about Steve Horwich and connect the thoughts, go to our show notes at theluminousmind.net. Also, be sure to become a subscriber to our free email list so you can receive our weekly audio blog, The Spark. We would love to have you join our program. Do so by going to the scheduling tab to become a fire starter today. Help support the podcast by making all your Amazon purchases through the free Amazon widget on our website, theluminousmind.net. Also, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Google+. Get our audio content on YouTube, iTunes, and Stitcher. Leave us a review. Tell us how we can help you so together we can continue to light minds on fire and change the paradigm of education.